Hello there everybody and welcome back to another EDH gameplay video brought to you by Affinity for Commander. My name is Martin and today we have a battle for you between four heavy hitting tribes: Graceful Elves, Ravenous Werewolves, Gargantuan Dinosaurs and Ravenous Squirrels. But before we begin, I'd like to personally thank all of the absolutely amazing patrons listed on screen for their heartwarming generosity. We wouldn't be able to continue making videos such as these without your support, so thank you. Also, if you decide to make a purchase from any of these websites, then be sure to do so via our affiliate links in the video description. It won't cost you anything extra, but it really helps us out. And if you haven't already, then go and check out altersleeves.com, where you can find thousands of super cool designs on perfect fit sleeves to really bling out your decks. Just be sure to quote us as the ones who sent you. But that is enough of that. Let's take a look at those opening hands. I am playing my Gishath Sun's Avatar Dinosaur Tribal deck, which aims to ramp hard in order to get my commander out as early as possible. The deck also runs a variety of spells that increase Gishath's power and grant her double strike, allowing me to cheat as many dinosaurs into play as possible with her ability. I keep an opening hand consisting of Soul Ring, Boros Charm, Kinjali Sunwing, Trapjaw Tyrant, Colossal Dreadmaw, Jungle Shrine and Myriad Landscape.
Conor is playing his Tovolar Dire Overlord Werewolf tribal deck, which runs a surprising number of lords and anthem effects for such a poorly supported tribe. His deck also contains a wolf tribal sub-theme, given that there is a pretty strong synergy between these and their werewolf cousins. Conor's starting hand is made up of Duskwatch Recruiter, Kessig Naturalist, Silver Fur Partisan, Nightpack Ambusher, Vanquisher's Banner, a mountain and a forest.
Tom is playing his Chatterfang Squirrel General Squirrel Tribal deck, which looks to create as many fuzzy-tailed rodents as possible with a heavy token production package. In addition to this, he also runs a lot of removal spells, removing his opponent's greatest threats and clearing the way for his buck-toothed army to attack. Tom keeps an opening hand containing Nature's Claim, Harvest Season, Geome Master Chef, Second Harvest, Snuff Out, Windswept Hearth and a Swamp.
And finally, Hugo is playing his Lathril Blade of the Elves Elf tribal deck, which, like most elf decks, wants to get as many low mana value creatures onto the board as quickly as possible. He also runs a lot of cards that trigger whenever creatures enter the battlefield, which is pretty frequent in a deck like this. Hugo's starting hand is made up of Arbor Elf, Elves of Deep Shadow, Elvish Vanguard, Golgari Charm, Elven Ambush, a forest, and another forest. Conor wins the die roll and starts things off by playing a forest. With no turn 1 play, he passes to Hugo.
Hugo plays a forest and casts Arbor Elf before passing the turn.
Tom plays Windswept Heath, which he immediately sacrifices, paying 3 life to put Overgrown Tomb into play untapped. He then uses the tomb to cast Deathrite Shaman and ends his turn.
In my turn, I play Myriad Landscape and pass to Conor.
Conor plays a mountain and casts Kessig Naturalist. The Puppy Hugger's Daybound ability triggers, changing the time of day to, well, day, and Conor passes the turn.
Hugo plays Woodland Cemetery and casts Elvish Vanguard. Next he taps Arbor Elf to untap his forest, which he then uses to cast Elves of Deep Shadow. Hugo puts a +1/+1 counter on his Vanguard and ends his turn.
Tom plays a swamp and exiles the fetch land in his graveyard with his Shaman's ability. He floats a green mana in this way and then uses it to help cast Harvest Season. Tom searches his library for a forest, puts the land into play tapped, and passes to Martin.
In my turn I play a mountain and then cast Soul Ring. With nothing more to do, I pass the turn.
Conor starts his turn by playing a forest and casts his commander, Tovolar Dire Overlord. Moving to combat, he attacks Tom with his Naturalist, adding a red to his mana pool with the Werewolf's attack trigger. Unable to block, Tom takes 2 damage and Conor draws a card with his commander's ability before ending his turn.
Hugo plays a forest and takes 1 damage from Elves of Deep Shadow to help cast his commander, Lathril, Blade of the Elves. He puts a +1/+1 counter on Elvish Vanguard, taps Arbor Elf to untap a forest, and uses the forest to cast Llanowar Elves. Hugo puts another counter on his Vanguard, and then moves to combat, where he attacks Conor with his now 4/4 Elf. Conor declares no blocks, taking 4 damage, and Hugo passes to Tom.
Tom plays Command Tower, and then moves to combat. Here he attacks Martin with his Shaman, and Martin responds by sacrificing his Mirror Landscape. He puts 2 planes into play tapped, takes 1 damage, and Tom moves to his second main phase. Here Tom taps out to cast Guillaume, Master Chef, and moves to his end step. Guillaume's ability triggers, making a food token, and Tom passes the turn.
I play Jungle Shrine as my land for turn, and then tap out to cast Trapjaw Tyrant. Happy to finally have a creature in play, I end my turn.
Conor begins his turn by playing a forest, and then casts Daybreak Ranger. Not wishing to lose any of his creatures by attacking, Conor passes to Hugo.
Hugo plays a swamp and moves to combat. Here he attacks Tom with Lathril, which Tom is unable to block due to the elf having Menace. Tom takes 2 damage in this way, and Hugo creates 2 1/1 elf warriors thanks to Lathril's ability. He puts 2 +1/+1 counters on Elvish Vanguard and moves to his post-combat main phase where he casts Wood Elves. Hugo searches his library for a forest, puts the land into play tapped, and puts yet another +1/+1 counter on Elvish Vanguard. Pleased with his board state, Hugo passes the turn.
In his turn, Tom casts his commander, Chatterfang Squirrel General. He then moves to his end step where Guillaume creates him a food token, and Chatterfang creates a squirrel.
Such synergy!
With 1 mana remaining, Tom ends his turn.
I cast Meori's Wake, and with nothing more to do, pass to Conor.
In Conor's upkeep, Tovolar changed the time of day to night, and then transforms each of Conor's werewolves into their furrier sides. This results in Tovolar transforming into Tovolar the Midnight Scourge, Kesing Naturalist turning into Lord of the Ulvenwald, and Daybreak Ranger becoming Nightfall Predator. After all this, Conor casts Dustwatch Recruiter, and then passes the turn.
Hugo starts his turn by moving straight to combat, attacking me with his menacing commander. Not wanting Hugo to create any more elves, Conor responds to this by tapping his Nightfall Predator, having the werewolf fight Lathril. This results in the elf's untimely demise, and Hugo moves to his second main phase. Here he recasts Lathril, forgetting to put a +1/+1 counter on Elvish Vanguard, and plays Temple of Malady. Hugo scries the top card of his library, which is definitely not a swamp, to the bottom of his library, and ends his turn. Tom responds to this by casting Nature's Claim, destroying my Meori's Wake and gaining me 4 life. With no further interruptions, Tom proceeds to his turn.
Tom plays a forest and casts Birds of Paradise. He then moves to his end step, creating a food and a squirrel as he does so, and passes to Martin.
I cast Explosive Vegetation, searching my library for a forest and a mountain and putting them onto the battlefield tapped. With 2 untapped mana, I pass the turn.
Conor begins his turn by casting Kodama's Reach, searching his library for a mountain and a forest. He puts the former into play tapped, plays the latter as his land drop, and ends his turn.
In his turn, Hugo casts Elvish Warmaster and puts a +1/+1 counter on his Vanguard. He then passes to Tom, who responds by casting Second Harvest. This creates him 2 squirrels and 3 food tokens, and Chatterfang's ability creates Tom an additional 5 squirrels as well.
Well, that escalated quickly.
Pleased with the growth of his rodent army, Tom moves to his turn.
Tom casts a very shiny Miri's Guile, and passes.
In my turn, I cast Burning Sun's Avatar, having the dinosaur deal 3 damage to Hugo and 3 damage to Elvish Warmaster. The elf is destroyed, and I end my turn, to which Conor responds by activating his Nightfall Predator's ability. He has the werewolf fight Tom's chef, and Tom responds to this by sacrificing a food to make the troll indestructible. With nothing more to do, Conor proceeds to his turn.
Conor casts Silver Fur Partisan and passes to Hugo.
In Hugo's turn, I propose a deal in order to get rid of Tom's pesky Master Chef, asking Hugo to attack me with an elf in order to trigger my Chapjaw's Enrage ability. Liking the sound of this, Hugo moves to combat and Tom responds by casting Snuff Out, paying 4 life instead of the spell's mana cost. Not wanting my dinosaur to die, I respond by casting Boros Charm, giving my creature indestructible. Not yet finished, Tom responds to this by sacrificing 5 squirrels to Chatterfang's ability, giving my dinosaur +5/-5 in this way. The Trapjaw is destroyed, and Hugo decides not to attack, moving to his second main phase. Here he casts his Zendikar Resurgent, taking 1 damage from his Elves of Deep Shadow, and passes.
Tom uses Miri's Guile to rearrange the top 3 cards of his library, draws, and exiles the Myriad Landscape in Martin's graveyard with Deathrite Shaman. He then uses all of his mana to cast Avenger of Zendikar, which creates him 5 0/1 plant tokens, as well as 5 1/1 squirrels. Tom then moves to his end step, creating a food token with Yome, and another squirrel with Chatterfang, before ending his turn.
I start my turn by casting Kadama's Reach, searching my library for 2 forests and putting one of them into play tapped. Next I play the other forest as my land for turn, and cast Kinjali's Sunwing. Not yet finished, I cast Savage Stomp, putting a +1/+1 counter on my Sunwing and having it fight Hugo's commander. The elf is destroyed, and I pass to Conor, who responds by flashing in Howlpack Resurgence before proceeding to his turn.
In Conor's turn, night gives way to day, and all of his werewolves transform back into their human counterparts. They don't stay this way for long though, as Tovolar's ability triggers in Conor's upkeep, changing it back to night. This transforms all of his werewolves into their more bestial selves, including flipping Duskwatch Recruiter into Callan Horde Howler. Next, Conor casts Vanquish's Banner, choosing Werewolf as his desired creature type, and moves to combat. Here he attacks Tom with Tovolar, Lord of the Overworld, Krallen Horde Howler, and his Wolf Warrior, and Tom blocks Tovolar with all 10 of his Squirrel tokens. Conor responds to this by activating his Nightfall Predator's ability, having the werewolf fight Tom's Master Chef. Out of mana to make his chef indestructible, Tom puts the troll into his graveyard, and combat damage then occurs. Conor's commander takes out 7 squirrels before falling to the scurry of squirrels, and Tom takes 15 damage from the unblocked creatures that attacked him. Tovolar's ability triggers before he succumbs to the squirrels, drawing Conor 3 cards, and Conor moves to his second main phase. Here he plays a forest as his land for turn, discards down to 7, and passes.
Hugo begins his turn by recasting his commander, who enters the battlefield tapped thanks to my Kinjali's Sunwing. He draws a card from Zendikar's Resurgence, puts a +1/+1 counter on Elvish Vanguard, and ends his turn.
Tom changes the order of the top 3 cards of his library, draws, and casts Deadly Dispute. He sacrifices a plant to the spell, drawing 2 cards, creating a treasure, and then creating a scroll thanks to his commander's ability. Next he plays Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth as his land for turn, putting a +1/+1 counter on each of his plants, and then casts Beastmaster's Ascension. Moving to combat, Tom attacks Martin with his 3 scroll tokens, and Conor with his 4 plants. This puts 7 quest counters on Beastmaster's Ascension, giving all of Tom's creatures +5/+5, and neither Conor nor Martin declare any blocks. Damage then occurs with Conor taking 24 and Martin taking 18, and a rather happy Tom passes to Martin.
In my turn, night becomes day, and all of Conor's werewolves transform into their human sides. I then cast Regal Behemoth, which has received an erratum to make it a dinosaur, and become the Monarch. Next I use my double mana producing lands to cast my commander, Gishath, Sun's Avatar, and move to combat. Here I attack Conor with Gishath, and unable to block he takes 7 damage. I reveal the top 7 cards of my library, putting a Tali Primal Storm onto the battlefield with my commander's ability, and move to my end step. Here I draw a card with the Monarchy, and pass the turn.
In his turn, Conor plays a forest and recasts his commander. Next, he casts Hermit of the Gnolls and ends his turn. Hugo responds to this by casting Elven Ambush, and Tom responds to this by casting Abrupt Decay. Tom targets Elvish Vanguard with his kill spell, and Hugo responds by casting Veil of Summer, drawing a card, and giving his creatures hexproof from black. This causes Abrupt Decay to fizzle, and Hugo creates 8 1/1 Elf Warrior tokens when Elvish Ambush finally resolves. This puts 8 +1/+1 counters on Elvish Vanguard, and Hugo finally moves to his turn.
Hugo starts his turn by casting Grim Tutor, losing 3 life in order to search his library for Coat of Arms. He puts the artifact into his hand, casts Dwynen's Elite, and creates another Elf Warrior with the Elite CCB. Hugo puts 2 +1/+1 counters on his Vanguard, making it a 19/19, and then casts Chromatic Lantern. Not yet finished, Hugo casts the Coat of Arms that he just tutored for, giving all of his elves +17/+17.
Now that's what I call an Anthem effect.
Moving to combat, Hugo attacks Tom with 6 of his elf tokens, and me with 4 elf tokens, Wood Elves, Elvish Vanguard, and his commander. Unable to survive the attack, Tom declares no blocks, and I block Lathril with 2 dinosaurs and an elf token with my remaining 3 dinosaurs. Lathril and the token are destroyed, Tom and I take lethal damage, and Hugo becomes the new monarch. With nothing more to do, Hugo moves to his end step, where he draws from his monarchy and passes to Conor.
Tovolar changed the time of day to night in Conor's upkeep, transforming all of his werewolves into their wolfen counterparts. Hermit of the Gnolls changes into Lone Wolf of the Gnolls, and Conor casts Green Sun Zenith, where X is 8. He searches his library, putting Craterhoof Behemoth onto the battlefield in this way, giving all of his creatures +7/+7 and trample. This, combined with the +8/+8 granted by Coat of Arms and Conor's 3 Anthem effects, allows Conor to swing for lethal with his army of puppers, winning him the game.
Well, that is it for another game. I hope that you enjoyed watching Conor turn Hugo's Anthem effect against him to claim victory. Don't forget that you can help the channel in 4 quick and easy ways: liking this video, subscribing, hitting that bell icon, and leaving us a comment. I read every one. And if you really like us, then consider checking out our Patreon page, where you can find exclusive rewards such as custom tokens and playmats for as little as $1 a month. That's all for now though, we'll see you next time. Stay awesome!